Hi, and welcome back to the Brandtelling Podcast. I'm really excited today to welcome my friend and guest, Steve Bookbinder. Steve is a coach, trainer, and author, and he creates a lot of online content all around the idea of sales and connecting with your audience and your customers. Steve, welcome to the Brandtelling Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Arthur.
Now, Steve, I know that you have trained more than 50,000 people in 5,000 in-person workshops. I miss those in-person, Steve. 500 sales kickoffs, hundreds of keynote speeches here in North America, also South America, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Steve, is there any kind of commonality that you would say among all of those different presentations that you've given?
Well, the groups are always different. The industries are always different. The go-to-market strategies are always different. But there's one challenge, which is that all salespeople have, and the only job that has this is sales, and that is every year they raise the goals.
Right.
The joke is every year they raise the goals by 10%. But sometimes it's more than that, or the combination of raising the goals while entering a new territory or something like that. So the sports equivalent is every year you got to hit a personal best. So that's
Right.
the common thing. Every year you got to do something you didn't do prior to that.
Right. So every year somebody's raising your quota. So you've got a room full of people who are going, I hope this is really worth it because I got to go make some more sales today. I got to boost out of here. So Steve, tell me a little bit and tell the audience a little bit, how did you become a sales trainer, sales coach?
Oh, well, so I started off wanting to avoid sales, and I can no longer
I think
remember
we all do
exactly
that, right?
why. Yeah, I mean, it's just if I didn't know what I wanted to do, I just knew sales wasn't it. And I think because, the image of sales that you get from characters in movies and TV shows and books always paints sales as either the butt of a joke or a terrible job. But the reality is, especially for business to business sales, once you're in it, it's a great job. And in fact, now I would consider it to be, all other jobs seem boring in comparison. But I started off trying to avoid it. So what do you do when you try to avoid it? You go on the artistic side. I was in an ad agency working on the artistic side, the creative side. That was during the day. And at night, I was a stand-up comic. I liked being on stage. And eventually the pressure writing new material became so great, and somebody introduced me to improv comedy, and I thought, you don't have to write anything, even better. So then, and it's a great job, except it's a lot of fun, but it doesn't make a lot of money. And so I tried to find something that kind of combined what I like to do and avoid what I didn't like to do. And I discovered this thing called sales training. And so I really didn't even know much about sales. I just knew that if I was doing sales training, I could be on stage during the day. And the nature of the training I was doing was looking at companies' pipelines and trying to help them improve their pipelines. Well, when you get involved with clients and you talk about pipelines, you can't not talk about things like sales metrics, sales challenges. What do you tell salespeople? What do they end up doing? And the pipeline is like the reality. It's like literally taking your temperature. And so in that process, the senior sales management of my clients, and these are the biggest clients all over the world, companies all over the world, they shared with me. It's like they opened up their secret meeting rooms, and they shared with me what works, what doesn't work. And I got a chance to work directly with salespeople. And over the years, you get to see what really works and what doesn't work. And that influenced me. I also, because I started off as an actor, I looked at sales very differently than the way most people do. I didn't look at, are you consulting enough? I didn't look at it in that way. I looked at it like an actor does. So what do you have to do? What do you have to present yourself? How do you have to speak? How do you have to communicate to get the reaction you're looking for? Because acting and comedy is all about getting the reaction. And what I notice is that salespeople, the most effective ones, were effective because they were getting the right reaction. They weren't merely just checking the box. I asked the right consultative question, or I challenged with the right line, or I spun the sale the right way. It's they got the right reaction. And so it was a combination of those things that helped me. And then at some point along the way, I had started working with companies all across every industry vertical. I mean, companies as different as AT&T on the one side and IBM, and then companies like a cemetery monument company. So like every company you could think of, companies you couldn't. But along the way, I bumped into a digital marketing, and I did that in the late 1990s, early 2000s. Fell in love with the business, realized digital marketing was where the world was going, and I needed to jump with 2 feet into this world, or I would be replaced like the way some jobs, like travel agent jobs and other, encyclopedia sales jobs, and so many jobs were replaced with the internet. I felt that same thing could happen to me. So I went to the digital marketing, the ad tech, which is like the deep end of the pool from a technology point of view, and spent a number of years in there, and then reemerged a few years later when one of the digital marketing pioneers, a guy named Dave Moore, asked me to start a training company with him. But now I had a new specialty besides sales training, digital marketing. And over the years, I found that salespeople need to combine the thinking of a digital marketer along with their sales skills in order to be effective. And so that's what I bring to the world today, a kind of a
So,
digital marketing thinking salesperson.
so I think that's fascinating, especially, you know, we talk a lot about the marketing groups within a large company. You know, you mentioned AT&T or IBM, but even in a mid-sized company, a managed solutions provider. And one of the challenges that I often hear from clients is that marketing and sales aren't aligned. That's always the favorite one is, marketing team has spent so much time putting together this marketing collateral, and the sales team just isn't using it. And I often say, well, did you include the sales team when you're making it? And they say, no, why would I do that? And so that's one of the challenges, because I often think, well, the sales team speaks to the customers every day. And so they're a little closer there. The other is the marketing team often, has the right idea. They want to align and they want to tell a story, but the sales team isn't always aligned with the story. And individual sales members may not tell the story as well as others. What's been your take when you've got a group of salespeople, not just a single or solo salesperson, but a group of salespeople? How do you get them to tell that story in a way where they're aligned, where Dave tells it the same way as Sarah tells it the same way as Bill?
Well, uh, over the years, everybody has spotted the sales department and the marketing department. They're on different floors in different buildings, if not literally, sort of.
Right,
They're kind of
right,
psychologically that way. But what really brought it to a head, in my view, is a number of years ago, every company on the planet decided to do a content marketing campaign with a goal of getting inbound leads. And I think probably from senior management's point of view, they said, what? And somebody said, it's blah, 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 blah. We get leads that come into our building. Oh, inbound lead. Oh, that sounds like magic, but I'm in. And so
right.
everybody went into this inbound lead. And there's it's like typical of everything in life. There's a devil in the detail. 5% of the leads are sales qualified leads. Literally a customer raising their hand saying, please contact me. Please have a salesperson contact me. But 95% of the leads are marketing qualified leads where the customer didn't really say that at all. They got a lead score because they engaged with the company's digital content. If I go to your website a couple of times, if I download a video, if I read an article, if I sign up for a webinar, it's assumed that I'm interested in buying something, which may or may
Right.
not be true. It probably is not true. And so there was never enough of the hot leads. So the marketing didn't want to get in trouble. They're supposed to get more and more leads. So they end up giving a little bit of great leads and mostly these not perfect leads. And the salespeople would have to nurture these leads. Well, both sides kind of point to each other. I thought you were nurturing the leads. If I'm in sales, I'm thinking, I thought the marketing department's job was to get me the hot lead. And the marketing department was saying, no, 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 we're getting you strangers into your universe. You have to nurture them. But nobody knew how to properly nurture them. And that nurturing is where you really bridge sales and marketing. And just to add one more thing to this, marketers tend to be good writers. So they can write in a number of different voices, especially the good ones. Salespeople tend to not be good writers because we were hired into a sales role because of how we sound. So you go
Right.
into a sales interview, if you sound like you could speak intelligently to a customer and in a credible way, you get the job. Nobody in sales is asked to write something and then have their writing evaluated. So as a result, we see, in sales, your primary way of communicating very often in today's world is writing. So if you don't have great writing skills, you only have one way of writing it. And what's interesting is with people who are, especially when they're not good writers, they're typically also not good readers. But when they write something, when they read to you what they wrote, they read it in the voice that they assume the reader will read it in. And they can only imagine it being read back in that way. But in reality, you could read things in a lot of different ways. If
Right.
you capitalize the letters, it looks like you're screaming. Your most clear example of that. And so what we find is that the salespeople are poor writers, and they need the writing skills that the marketing department has. And so you need the two to work together to develop templates. And then you got to think about digital marketing in this sense. Digital marketing is not about guessing what works. It's about knowing what works based on data. So if you're going to write something, you have to have an A/B test or an ABC test, which means that you got to have three different templates, and then you have to have a way of measuring which one works. And which one works is a quality measure. Salespeople like quantity measures, and they like it to be machine counted. So Salesforce.com or my CRM or my marketing platform counts the number of things I do. But what it can't do is a quality measure. How many calls were good? How many emails were effective? Well, you got to combine maybe 5 different quantity measures to arrive at that, and pulling the data from different sources. So nobody does. So when I'm working with teams, I'm working with the sales team on how to write better and how to message better and how to not only message better in writing, but verbally. Often the marketing department is in the room with me because they want to hear what I'm teaching, and I want them there because I want them both working on the problem together. How do we get, the messaging right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's interesting. Something I want to get to in a little bit when we talk about your book is you know getting the messaging right by asking the right questions. I think is one of the keys. And I often wonder whether we are asking the right questions all the time. We seem to ask a lot of questions, especially with technology firms or manufacturing firms, firms that have a lot of complex parts to the sale. They like to talk about all the feature sets, and I often think those are important to somebody in the organization, but not always that important to the person that you're making the sale to. That the I don't know whether the do we have that right feature for you is the question as much as it is, are you going to get the kind of benefit that you expect from this item? What's the output going to be? The output isn't going to be, if we're talking about a car, the output isn't going to be, oh, it's the pearl black exterior. That's not why somebody bought the car. That might be one of the deciding factors is the color of the car, but the output is, does the car get me from A to B? Does it carry my whole family? Is it a nice, well put together car? Is it a good car if I have to have clients in it? If it's a business, those are the benefit things, but those are rarely the things that get discussed. I'm looking at a new car, and it's rare that I get asked, how big's your family? How many people are in the car? It's just I often think, well, that's a missed opportunity for a big discussion there.
Yeah, well, in the car sales, I mean, there are, car salespeople are usually maligned as the worst salespeople. There are some good ones, but
Sure.
most of them I'll tell you where it's an obvious question. I drive my car to the dealer. I get out, walk in the dealership. I walk around. They ask me, "Are you interested in this car, the one you're standing next to?" But what they really should say is, "Can you tell me about the car you drove here today, your car? How did you decide to buy that car?" How I
Right.
decided to buy that car is my buying pattern. If you don't ask me about my buying pattern, I believe you're pushy. That what makes a salesperson look pushy? When the salesperson ignores your buying patterns. So they assume I'm ready to buy today with cash or get financing a car. Meanwhile, it could just be shopping. And so there's a couple of things that come together. I think the customer has changed. Studies show that even business to business customers are acting more like consumers, which means what they're doing is that the customer is doing a lot of the shopping and thinking and deciding. They're 50 to 75% of the way through the buying cycle before they even speak to a salesperson. So they start to collect information, but only from the influencers that they trust, and they start to get opinions. And once you start to get opinions, then you start to filter the world and listen for certain things and ignore other kinds of things. And so the salesperson that doesn't recognize that the sale didn't begin when the customer began to talk. When the customer began to talk to the salesperson, the sale began when the customer and whoever they work with, all their influencers, began to think about doing something and talk about it and asking each other things and talking about what their goals are and figuring out what they might need. Then at some later point, they bring in the salesperson. So
That's right.
meanwhile, the salesperson acts like the sale just began, like the whole conversation just began
Right.
because
When they
they
walk in
jumped
the
in.
door. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then every salesperson, every one of them, and this is the thing I saw with every salesperson, they do this thing they call qualify. So when everybody uses the same word, they go, "You qualify?" "Oh yeah, we qualify." "You sure they qualify?" And your sales manager will say, "Are you qualifying properly?" So what does qualifying mean? If you ask people, what does it mean to be qualified? They go, "Well, that the person is potentially the decision maker and they could potentially get the right budget." Okay, well, guess what? Practically everybody you'll ever speak to is qualified from those 2 points of view. And so they end up asking questions like, "So are you the right person? Are you one of the right people? I don't want to offend. Are you part of the decision making? I don't want to." And meanwhile, the customer, "Yeah, I'm the right one. Yes, yes, talk to me. I'm the one. I'm the one." And they continue to say that until the salesperson delivers a proposal. The moment you hand a proposal to a customer, this is what they go: "All right, I have to talk to my boss." Well, and you should be thinking, you want to say, "Wait a minute, I asked you 100 different ways if you were the one," and all of a sudden there's a boss, there's a committee, there's another person. He didn't mention that until this moment, and so the
You
person
could have asked
disagrees.
them, how did you make the last purchase? Who was involved? And you
Who's
might have heard some of those things.
Yeah, yeah, and are you going to do it the same way this time as you did it last time? So understanding that backstory, what made, in fact, the moment when people, even an inbound lead, I often point out to salespeople, the customer either called as an end result of 100 activities that finally resulted in them calling the salesperson, or they ran out of things to do. They actually were sitting around at work going, "Does anybody know how to kill the day? I don't know what to do. Hey, I know. Why don't we call this company and talk to a salesperson? That'll kill a couple hours." So, obviously that's not it, but that's how the salesperson reacts. So what I realized along the way was that there is no one decision maker, even if there's a main point of contact. Even and usually the salesperson is guided by the person's title. So if
Right.
I'm selling sales training, I go to the training manager. If I'm selling HR services, I go to the head of HR. If I'm selling communication, I go to the head of communication. The thing about the person who's got your title, your product in their title, they're perfectly positioned to block you. And they almost never can make the decision by themselves. And so realizing that what really happens is this: salesperson talks to a customer, they go blah 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 blah. Let me tell you all about these features and benefits, and let me try to wow you in what I believe would be wow impacting kind of communication. And then they go, "All right, I'll talk to you next week, or I'll talk to you at some point, or think about that." And the salesperson leaves, and the customer then talks to whoever influences them, which are typically their boss, their staff, their peers. Well, something happens in that conversation, and I believe what happens is the customer who spoke to the salesperson says, I just spoke to a salesperson and they told me blah, 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 blah. If the person they're talking to, the influencer in their life, looks like this, "Ugh," or looks like this, that look, that reaction changes everything. And you know how I could scientifically prove this? The biggest problem people have with their pipelines is there's no next step. So they have a lot of things in their pipeline that they're counting on where there's no next step. You know why there's no next step? Because when the customer talked to their influencer, the influencer either said no or went, ugh, and the customer said, you know what, let me focus on something else instead of that thing. And they never get back to the salesperson, and there's no next step. So how do we get more next steps? Well, we got to change the conversation, not between the salesperson and the customer, but between the customer and the people they talk to. Well, what are they saying? What are they able to say? Are we saying something like, the customer is not a good salesperson. I'm a better salesperson than my customer. So I have to now teach my customer not only kind of how to sell, but what to say.
Right.
What words are they using? Are they telling my stories? Are they using my examples? Or did I give them, if you'll pardon the expression, marketing speak, which is what
Right.
salespeople end up doing. They go, let me tell you about us. We blah, 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 blah. And now the customer actually can't repeat that. So they summarize it in their head and they come
And
up with a watered down version of that doesn't impact anybody.
That's a great segue. When I talk about brand telling, I talk about telling a story that can be remembered, repeated, and rewarded. And in that way, what I mean is that a story that the person who you've told the story to will remember it, then they will repeat it to others, and you'll be rewarded in the way that that story comes back to you. And I think that is a really good segue into your new book, which I read cover to cover, like it was a mystery novel, and I really enjoyed the examples that you gave, and so I want to bring that up here. The book is Echo Selling, and maybe Steve, talk a little bit about what you were just saying about how someone goes back and they either get this is a great idea. I'm going to drop off this idea from their influencers, from their peers. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that and how that became that genesis for you for the Echo Selling book.
Great. Thanks. Well, first of all, because I've spoken to so many salespeople, it's not only that I've trained them, but as part of my work, I listen on calls. I'm in the back of the digital room when they're in a digital meeting. So I actually get to see what they say and what they hear. I read their emails and stuff like that, and I talk to them. So what I've learned is there's a couple of things that are happening. One is that the salesperson is guessing what to say, which features and benefits will really, like, I can make you more productive. I can make you more efficient. Guess who says to their customers, we're going to make you more productive, we're going to make you more efficient? Everybody on the planet, no matter what you're selling, you're claiming that you can make the customer more productive and efficient. So much so that the customer naturally is wondering, gee, every competitor says, every one of the salespeople's competitors says the same thing. And you know what? What's the difference between one and the other? So they end up wondering about certain things which they may or may not literally say. But I believe there are 5 questions that every customer is wondering about. And they're listening not to everything that the salesperson says, but they're specifically listening for the answers to these 5 questions. And then when the customer who talked to the salesperson talks to their influencer, the influencer is wondering about those. And these are questions which, as I say them, will make a lot more sense. That first one, what do we sell which is relevant to helping me? So if I'm the customer, that's the way I say it in the book. But another way of saying it is, what problems do we solve? Not what do we sell, what problems do we solve? Well, I need to have a way of communicating that so that my customer hears in my explanation that the salesperson is trying to solve the same kind of problems that I, as the customer, have. And then when I talk, when that one customer talks to their influencers, they want to be able to say something like, or let's give them the ammunition to say something like, I talked to a salesperson, and you know how we're trying to solve this problem? Well, this salesperson's company solves that problem, and here's some of the ways they solve it. So we've got to anticipate that question and have an answer. What makes the salesperson's offer different? Most people, when they're salespeople, try to make things up as they go along, often, and they improv the wrong things. So the salesperson is either being asked what makes you different, or they're should be ready for that answer. And but the answer that most salespeople make up is, what makes us different? What makes it? Well, there's me. So they always come up with that same joke. Well, there's me. But meanwhile, what you really want to have is, don't sell, just tell. Just say what the differences are, because recognize that the customer is confused. All the companies sound alike. They're all solving the same problem, making you more productive, more efficient. So given that, what makes it? And so the answer is going to sound something like this. Well, there are 4 things that make us different. There's this, that, and there's no magic number. There's 3 things that make us. There's 1 thing. There's 10 things that make us different, but there's 1 that's relevant to you. So
I always think this one's fascinating because what I often hear someone say is, we're really customer centric and we're really, focused on giving you what you want. And I say, oh, that's good, because the other company I was talking to is completely, uncentric for the customer. They're really, focused on going on vacation to Hawaii. No, everybody says they're customer centric. Everybody says that they're focused on,
yes, nobody doesn't say that. Nobody says we're not customer centric.
Right. No one's going to say we're focused on ourselves and we don't really care about you. And of course, no one's going to say that.
Right.
I just always think they choose some odd things to say that are going to be their differentiator. What makes us different? Well, we have, 10 years of experience. Okay, this company has 30 years of experience. Are they 3 times better than you? No, they're not. But
right.
So that's not a differentiator.
Yeah. And then a lot of salespeople confuse the question 2 with 3. Question 3 is, what's the advantage? And another way of saying this is, imagine the customer said, well, why should I work with you? Right. What they're not saying is, why do you, Ms. or Mr. Salesperson, why do you think I should work with you? Because obviously the salesperson is paid to say, well, I think you should work with me. The answer to why you should work with me is not why I think you should work with me. It's the stories of why customers who are like you work with me. So the answer's got to be, well, let me tell you why this very similar customer to you is working with me. Let me tell you why we renew at 95% of a renewal rate, or something like that. The biggest proof that your products and services really work, the biggest proof, is that others are using it. So the stories, the success stories, the talking about other people, that is more persuasive than the salesperson's sort of opinion about why somebody else in another business. When a salesperson says, you should work with me, I offer, you're not in my business. Who cares what you think?
Yeah, and I'm glad you refer to it as a success story. Too often I see companies, especially in technology companies, refer to them as case studies, and I think, well, that's a Harvard Business School term for what the students were taking back and reading. It was a case study for a case, a criminal or a civil case, but it's a customer success story because that again is going to be the most impressive thing. If as you say, echo selling is about what your sales target, your customer, is hearing back in their world. Part of what you want them to hear back in their world are other success stories from other people like them who have gone through the same problem, the same challenge, and come out the other side successfully. And
right.
And I think that I think we often miss that. I know in my own business I miss that. I'll tell people about what I do and maybe sometimes until I'm prompted. So have you ever worked with someone in my industry? Oh, you know what? Yes, in fact I have. And then that might be my prompt. I need to be better about prompting first. Hey, can I tell you a couple of people I've worked with in your industry that have successfully come out the other side from this? That's I think the key there.
Right. And what you just said, it's not only that I have an answer that I could pull out of my pocket when I'm asked. I have to, as a salesperson, anticipate I'm probably going to be asked. And even if I'm not asked, the customer is probably going to be wondering. So I need to prepare differently. So I walk into the meeting with those answers shoved into my back pocket so I'm ready to deliver them. And then the other thing is, and what the book is all about, is it's not just dashing down the answer, a quick 2 second worth of thought to answer. When I've done workshops with customers and I've said, let's spend a couple hours or a whole day answering these questions, what I've learned is no team can answer them easily. They spend hours drafting it. Even when I've brought the managers in, they'll spend hours drafting this. And after they spend hours and hours drafting it, I've worked with CEOs who are going to be speaking in front of investors, and I've gone through this drill with them. And they spend a whole day on this. And then I say, especially when it's managers, I say, well, if you just spend several hours and you're the manager, what do you think your salespeople are saying when your customers are asking these questions?
Right.
And that's when they realize we think we've got this great story to tell, but nobody's telling the story. So, and we also start to realize what it takes. And this is the echo selling is not only that you need an answer, but what it takes in terms of practice and role playing and developing to arrive at the answers that you could pull off in a meeting. And given the fact, most people don't recognize that, sales meetings are much harder than they look. I'm trying to look at the customer. I'm trying to listen to what they say. I'm trying to read their body language. I'm trying to think about where I'm going to bring this meeting strategically in an hour. I'm thinking about what else I've got in my pipeline, what else I got to do later in the day. It's 100 things going through my mind. Getting the right words to come out of your mouth when you're under pressure is the hardest thing in the world. And so echo selling describes the strategy of how to pull that off.
Steve, maybe you can walk us through those last two items, the 4 and the 5 item there.
Sure. So I can't decide to buy something in business unless I understand that I'm going to make more money than I spend. Where's the value? What's the ROI? So question 4 is, how am I going to make more money than I spend with you? What's the ROI? And the thing about ROI, your most common example of this is a window salesperson will say to you, I've got two kinds of windows. I've got the crappy window, which is on sale today, or the super great window, which will pay for itself in 5 years. 5 years ago, I happened to have bought new windows for my home 5 years ago. So I said to my wife, do you think we made more money than we spent? What did we spend in energy costs? And what you realize is NASA could not figure that out. So it isn't like there's an ROI, return on investment app. There is a psychology, which is the customer is going to use certain standards to defend why certain things are worth doing and certain things are not worth doing. And so the salesperson's got to find a way to combine the answers to 1 and 2, questions 1, 2, and 3, to form this, how are we worth more money? How do other customers justify, rationalize buying from us? How do they think that even though it sounds like our price is high, in fact, we're either going to save you this much money or help you make that much money or avoid a certain amount of risk for a certain, a small amount of money. We got to reposition. We've got to help the customer recalculate how they're calculating ROI. And then finally, there's this last one. And I found when I get ready for a sales call, I have to walk around the block a couple of times wondering this. I ask myself, what if the customer literally said to me, Steve, I am ready to buy. You convinced me. Now, what do I tell the others? What would I tell the others? Well, I need to explain to the customer why I thought we would be a good match for each other. Well, what was my rationale? Most salespeople not only don't provide that answer, don't even think about it, but the tone and the sound of their sales call sounds to me like this. Hi, I'm calling down a long list of names, and you're next. That's why I'm calling you. Hi, I bet you don't want to get this call, and frankly, I didn't want to make it, but my boss insists that I call a long lead list, and so you're next. Good luck with this call. As opposed to, the reason I'm calling you, I was doing this work. I thought about this. I realized you guys are doing this, and we do this, and I thought it's a perfect opportunity for the two of us to work together. What's the rationale? And if I could do it, and I could do it in an emotional, excited, confident way, I'm going to power the conversation between the customer and their influencers. I'm going to, when a person says, I got to talk to their boss, here's the question we should be asking. When you talk to your boss, are you going to be recommending us? Not, oh, can I go with you and talk to your boss instead of you? Are you going to recommend us? Well, if I could get my customer to not only talk about me, but to recommend me, in other words, I not only need to think about turning people into Salesforce.com opportunities, CRM opportunities, I need to convert everybody I speak to into a brand ambassador.
Right.
That's what I need to do. And that answer will help me get there.
Well, Steve, I appreciate that. I think it's great. It's not a long book, but you can see I've dog-eared some of the pages that I'm using and referring, and I've referred it to a couple of clients already. And I do think it's very useful, especially for those of us who work in digital marketing, because I think it shows a way to take that work that we're doing and make it more useful for the sales teams that we're working with, in a way that they can better understand. Hey, here's how to reach your prospects, and here's what's going on in their world, and that's why we're bothering to do all these messages. And as you said earlier, yeah, there's a lot of marketing qualified leads, but there's usually someone in that group who is the sales qualified lead among the group, and if the group can echo back to them that this is the right opportunity for us, that is that you've done the right work with building your story. So I think that's terrific.
Yeah.
Steve, let's let everyone know, where can we get a copy of the book. Here, you got your website address up here.
Yeah, so the book is available on Amazon and all online bookstores. If you want to see a description of it, go to www.stevebookbinder.com and you'll get a full description. You can also buy the book from directly from that website. And just one last thing. I didn't write the book because I happened to observe all these things. I wrote the book after I thought about everything I just showed you, and I had a desire to get an inbound lead from a customer, not any old customer, but a specific customer. So my goal was to do account-based selling, which means directly, proactively reach out to somebody, but I didn't want to reach out to them. I wanted them to reach out to me. And so what I did was a combination of social selling, email marketing, selling, using the messaging that I describe in the book. And I got the biggest sale I ever got. And I got it in the middle of the pandemic. And that's when I got so excited. I said, I am on to something. And that's so this book describes the success that I've had using this. So it's not just a theory. It's not just this might possibly work. This literally is what I did to close one of my biggest ever sales, and I know it'll work for other salespeople around the world.
That's terrific. Listen, Steve, thanks very much for joining us here today, talking about the book. Again, my guest has been Steve Bookbinder, and I want to thank everyone for joining me on the Brandtelling Podcast. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the podcast, hear from my guests like Steve and other thought leaders who can help you with your marketing. Thank you very much.